In the streets of 1980s Nigeria, one name struck fear deeper than any other: Lawrence Anini. They called him the law, not because he upheld it, but because he replaced it. For nearly 2 years, Anini's word ruled the streets of Benin City. Robberies were no longer a surprise. They were a routine. Daylight hits on banks, police checkpoints reduced to rubble, escapes that made the newspapers look like comic books. He didn't just break the law, he mocked it. In a time of rising inflation, growing inequality, and rampant corruption, Anini's violence felt unstoppable. The people whispered, the police scrambled, the government panicked. How could one man, just one, cripple an entire state? His methods were surgical, precise. He never stayed in one place. He had loyal insiders, informants within the police, and a ruthless streak knew no limits. Rumors swirled of black magic, invincibility, even invisibility. In some circles, he was painted as a Robin Hood, a man fighting back against a rigged system. But the blood on the street told a different story. His bullets didn't discriminate. His power came from fear. So who was Lawrence Anini? How did a taxi driver evolve into Nigeria's most feared gangster? Was it a personal fall or a symptom of something bigger? This story isn't just about armed robbery. It's about betrayal, corruption, fear, and how a single man exposed the darkest corners of Nigeria law enforcement and society itself. This is the rise, reign, and fall of Lawrence Anini. Lawrence Nomayabong Anini was born in the early 1960s in Benin City, in what was then Bendel State, Nigeria. His early years weren't remarkable, nor were they easy. Like many Nigerian youth of his time, he was born into poverty. The streets were his classroom. Hunger taught him to hustle. Injustice taught him to hide his anger. Every corner of Benin City echoed with tales of hardship. For a young Anini, crime didn't appear evil. It appeared necessary. As a teenager, Anini began driving a taxi. He quickly learned the layout of the city, its shortcuts, blind alleys, patrol routes, and back roads. But what he also saw was the corruption. Policemen shaking down drivers, officials asking for bribes, the rich laughing as the poor begged. Resentment began to brew. Not the kind that explodes, but the kind that simmers, quiet, dangerous. Anini soon fell with some small-time crooks, handling logistics, scouting targets. He kept quiet, listened more than he spoke, and absorbed everything. Over time, he realized the system didn't protect anyone. It was already broken. So why play by its rules? By the early 1980s, he formed his own gang. He wasn't looking for trouble, he was preparing for it. He recruited ex-military men, seasoned thieves, and most importantly, insiders, people who worked in police barracks, local government, transport offices. They fed him information, protected his crew, helped him vanish when needed. Among his notorious associates was Monday Osumbo, a cold-blooded enforcer who executed orders with terrifying precision. Anini's operations were ruthless, but they were also organized. His gang didn't shoot wildly or rob impulsively. They operated like a paramilitary unit. They studied blueprints, created decoys, wore disguises, and melted into crowds. They struck banks, intercepted police vehicles, robbed government convoys, and left behind mocking notes for authorities. Every hit wasn't just a crime, it was a message to the police, to the people. Lawrence Anini was done playing by the rules, and the streets of Nigeria were about to change forever. By 1985, Lawrence Anini wasn't just feared, he was infamous. His reign of terror stretched beyond Bendel State. Newspapers across Nigeria screamed headlines of daylight robberies, police execution, and market massacres. Citizens whispered his name like a curse. Politicians fumbled in embarrassment. Police morale collapsed. His methods were both brutal and brilliantly tactical. Anini's gang hit banks with military precision, entering in broad daylight, disabling alarm systems, and neutralizing security within minutes. They didn't just take the money, they made a point of leaving a message. Sometimes they left behind handwritten notes mocking the Nigerian police. Other times they delivered the message in blood. In one horrifying spree, Anini's men shot and killed 9 police officers in a single month. Checkpoints became bloodbath. Police patrols were ambushed, their weapons stolen and repurposed for more attacks. It wasn't about money anymore. It was domination. And Anini was relentless. During a single week in 1986, his crew robbed 4 commercial banks, stole vehicles, and assassinated a known police informant, all within a 72-hour window. Every strike was a psychological blow, not just a criminal act. He knew the media would cover it. He counted on it. Anini even sent a letter to the press, taunting the police commissioner, Inyang, by name. He demanded the release of arrested gang members and threatened more blood if his words were ignored. The police were stunned. Not only was he untouchable, he was theatrical. And Nigerians, they were terrified. Shopkeepers closed before noon. Banks added armed escorts. Parents forbade children from going outside after school. Benin City transformed into a ghost town after sunset. But there was another side to the story. In the slums, among the poor, a strange narrative emerged. Some saw Anini as a dark folk hero, not because of his crimes, but because of what he represented. A man who beat a corrupt system at its own game. Rumors spread that he shared his loot with locals, paid rent for poor families, and protected certain communities from rival gangs. True or not, the myth grew. Anini was no longer just a man, he was an idea. Untouchable, omnipresent, feared, and by some, respected. The police, meanwhile, were losing grip. Investigations were sabotaged from within. Rumors of moles within the force gained traction. Reports surfaced of police officers tipping off Anini in exchange for cash. Inyang was under pressure. Politicians demanded results. The public demanded answers. The president, in a rare moment of fury, publicly asked, "Where is Anini?" The question wasn't rhetorical. It was a challenge. And Lawrence Anini accepted it by vanishing even deeper into the shadows. By late 1986, Nigeria was in crisis. The police had failed. The president was humiliated. The people were terrified. The question echoed from every press conference, to every police outpost. Here is Anini. The manhunt for Lawrence Anini became the largest in the country's history. Roadblocks blanketed Bendel State. Search teams swept villages, markets, and even neighborhoods. Helicopters scanned rural forests. Informants were interrogated daily. Massive cash rewards were broadcast on radio and television. Still, nothing. Anini wasn't just hiding. He was vanishing. He operated through a web of safe houses maintained by loyal associates. Some were ex-gang members, others were ordinary citizens, silenced by fear or seduced by loyalty. Anini wore disguises, female clothing, herbalist robes, and even military uniforms. He carried forged identity cards and changed location every few days. The deeper the police looked, the more they realized something horrifying. He had help from within. Investigations uncovered evidence of multiple police officers aiding Anini's escape, either by tipping him off or sabotaging operations. The scandal grew so large, it sparked a national debate on corruption within the force. Anini had made the police look like fools, but cracks began to form. Pressure from above intensified. The president himself, General Ibrahim Babangida, ordered an immediate resolution. Within days, police arrested one of Anini's closest allies, who confessed under interrogation. He revealed the exact location of Anini's latest hideout, a girlfriend's apartment on Sakbomba Road, Benin City. The operation was quiet. No sirens, no lights, just heavily armed officers moving under the cover of darkness. On the morning of December 3rd, 1986, they struck. Anini tried to flee through the back door. A single shot hit his leg. He collapsed. The man who had terrorized a nation was dragged into a waiting vehicle, bleeding, silent, disarmed. He didn't resist. There was no magic, no escape, just a man wounded and stunned. The spell was broken. Anini, the law, had finally been captured. And Nigeria held its breath for what came next. When news broke that Lawrence Anini had been captured, the entire nation exhaled. Headlines screamed, "Anini caught." Streets buzzed with disbelief. After months of fear and chaos, there was finally closure. Or so people thought. But the story was far from over. Anini had been shot in the leg during his arrest. The bullet severed nerves in his spine, paralyzing him permanently from the waist down. He would never walk again. When he appeared in court, he was wheeled in, frail, silent, and surrounded by armed guards. The crowd outside surged forward, hungry to see the face behind the fear. Inside the police force, his arrest ignited a scandal. Within days, over 30 police officers were named as informants or accomplices. High-ranking officials were demoted, some were jailed. The revelation shocked the public. The force that should have protected them had sheltered their greatest threat. And then he spoke. During interrogation, Anini gave up names, locations, tactics, but he did so without remorse. He was calculated. Matter of fact, it felt less like a confession and more like a debrief. He even smiled at times, knowing the attention and the cameras were still on him. His most haunting statement, "I was fighting for my people." It wasn't just a defense, it was a belief. To some, he was deluded. To others, he had merely found a villain's way to justify his crimes. But to the poor and disenfranchised, it was a line that struck a complex chord. The trial began in February 1987, and it was national theater. Hundreds crowded the courtroom. Victims gave testimony. Former gang members pointed fingers. Police officers told stories of betrayal, fear, and shame. Each word painted the picture of a man who had operated in full view and full defiance of the law. The jury didn't take long. On March 29, 1987, Lawrence Anini was found guilty on all counts. His sentence, death by firing squad. There was no delay, no appeal, just one final day. He was executed days later, alongside his co-conspirators in a guarded section of Benin City. His body was buried in an unmarked grave. The reign of the law ended not in gunfire, but in silence, and the nation, scarred and sobered, began to pick up the pieces. The fall of Lawrence Anini left Nigeria changed forever. His capture and execution ended one of the darkest criminal chapters in the nation's history. But the question he raised didn't disappear. Why did it take so long to catch him? How could the police be so deeply compromised? And what does it say about a society where a man like Anini could become a legend? The Nigerian police force came under heavy scrutiny. A wave of internal investigations followed. Corrupt officers were dismissed. New anti-robbery units were formed, and police reform became a buzzword in national politics. But reform is easier said than done. Years later, many argued that the same cracks Anini exploited, corruption, poverty, weak institutions, still existed. His story became a case study in how crime doesn't grow in isolation. It grows in neglect, in injustice, in silence. In many communities, Anini's name never truly vanished. Older generations still recount his reign in hushed tones. Some view him as a villain, others as a tragic figure. For the poor, he became a paradox, feared for his violence, yet remembered for standing up to a corrupt elite. Whether myth or memory, Anini's name still carries weight. Nigerian popular culture also kept his legacy alive. Songs, street tales, and even films drew inspiration from his exploit. He became a cautionary tale, a shadow that reminded society what happens when law and order break down completely. But perhaps his greatest legacy is this: he forced a nation to confront its own failures. Anini didn't just rob banks, he exposed the rot in the system. He showed that a man with enough anger, strategy, and support could challenge the state and almost win. He proved that fear can silence truth, and he reminded Nigeria that justice delayed is more than just denied. It's dangerous. The story of Lawrence Anini isn't just about crime, it's about consequences. Because no matter how it ends, the law always leaves a scar. Lawrence Anini's story reads like a fiction, but it's frighteningly real. A taxi driver turned symbol of terror, a man who slipped through the cracks of a broken system and held a nation hostage. His reign ended in blood, but not before leaving a deep mark on Nigeria's collective memory. Anini wasn't a mastermind with unlimited resources. He was a product of circumstance, of corruption, of poverty, of failed institution and compromised law enforcement. His rise wasn't an accident, it was an outcome. He thrived in a country where justice was for sale, where police could be bought, where the poor had no voice. But his fall was just as revealing. When finally cornered, stripped of myth and charm, Anini was not a monster. He was a man, paralyzed, broken, and deeply alone. The illusion of invincibility vanished. What remained was the truth. No criminal escapes forever, and no society survives without justice. His name now serves as a warning to the state that the seeds of chaos are planted when systems fail their people. To the people, that heroism cannot be born from violence. To communities, that desperation breeds danger when there is no alternative. And to history, that the cost of letting crime grow unchecked is always paid in blood. Anini died by the gun, but not before holding up a mirror to an entire nation, a mirror that still reflects hard truths today. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Start the conversation, reflect on the root and not just the crimes. And if you want more untold true stories from Africa and beyond, like this video, subscribe to the channel and ring the bell. There are more stories waiting to be told, and history is watching who tells them.